So as the generator cost curve or generator power generation will be decided on the basis of fuel which is given to the generators. So on the basis of that fuel, how the cost will be varying, that will be the generator cost curve. So generator cost curve is a input output characteristic of the generator. It also defines the efficiency of the system, and it also provide fuel cost of the major energy contributors in the power plants. If we are using coal, if we are using diesel, or if we are using hydro or any other source, then what is the cost of that fuel is also decided on the basis of this. So the input output characteristic of a thermal generator, because generally thermal generator is having maximum fuel cost and other are not having major fuel cost dependency, because in hydro we are using water as a source. So generally we are only talking about thermal generators, and when we are talking about power systems, diesel generators are not part of the power system. They will be used for a small locality. So generally when we are talking about generators, we are generating stations, we have thermal power plants, we have hydro power plants, and we have nuclear power plants. So they are three thermal generators. So when we are talking about, we have thermal power plant, we have hydro power plant, we have nuclear power plant. So generally, majorly thermal power plants and hydro power plants are used in power system, and thermal power plants has coal as the input fuel, and in hydro we have water as the input. So generally water, we are considering it as free of cost. So for thermal power plants, because we are using coal as the input, so we have thermal generators for which we have to define the cost curve. So the cost function of the thermal generators can be represented by the following equations, that is known as CIPI. That will be E naught I plus Fi Bi Pi plus B2I Pi square. So this curve will be having a fixed cost, or generally it is represented as no load cost for operation of thermal power plant. And it is a fixed cost of thermal power plant. So if we are getting any power from the thermal power plant or not, there will be always a fixed cost which is associated if we are running a thermal power plant. Then we have this term, that is your variable cost, which will be depending on fuel cost and power. So in this we have two coefficients, that is B1I and B2I. They are the quadratic coefficients of the thermal input output curve. So they are constants and their unit is MBTU per megawatt hour. And then we have a fuel cost, that is Fi, and we have power generation, that is Pi. Actually, we have more Pi square, Pi cube, Pi4, but because B, that is your quadratic coefficients, will become very small when we are going for higher side of power. So we are neglecting it and we are only considering first two terms, that is Pi and Pi square. So 2, and we are reducing this as Ci Pi equal to A naught I plus beta 1 Pi plus gamma, beta I and gamma I Pi square. This is the reduced term for this cost curve, and the cost function of hydro or renewable generators comprises only no load cost because they are non-thermal unit and do not require any fuel for the input. So when we are talking about fuel curve, it will be like this. Fuel input, and this is your power in megawatt. So it will be like this. And this is your minimum cost or fixed cost. And then we have incremental fuel cost, which will be dCi upon dPi. So that is equal to beta I plus 2 gamma I Pi. That will be your incremental fuel cost. And for a power system to operate on a economical, we require that this incremental fuel cost of the system must be equal. So if we have two generators, we have DC 1 upon dP1 and we have DC 2 upon dP2. So for a power system to be economical operating, we require that these costs must be equal, because that is the condition when we will be having the minimum cost of generation. Because when we have two curves, one curve will be like this, second curve will be like this. So this is the point where the cost will be minimum, because lower to this or above to this, we will be having one cost as lower but other cost as higher. So this will be the point where we will be getting the minimum cost. So this will be the basic principle which we are using for the economical dispatch, deciding which generator will be generating how much power. So this is the basic introduction of your generator cost curve, because for hydro, renewable, we have only fixed cost. We don't have any variable cost because they don't require any fuel for the operation of hydro power plant or renewable power plants. So now we have utility functions. So an electrical utility is a company in the electrical power industry that engages in electricity generation and distribution of electricity for sales, generally in the regulated market. So when we are talking about utility, we have generation, transmission, and distribution. So, but when we are talking about utilities, we have only generations and we have distributions, because transmission is not directly decided by these utilities. So the distribution will be deciding what will be the load requirement of the system, and generation will be deciding how we will be supplying that load. Transmission line, because we don't have any control on the transmission line, the power which is generated by the generating stations will be sent to the distribution system with the help of transmission line. So the transmission line is not considered as the public utility, and we will be only deciding on the basis of generation and distribution. The cost which is associated with transmission line is used for the calculation of cost. So we have generation and we have distribution. So we have public utilities which will be having electricity generation and distribution. And that on the basis of all these parameters, the cost of electricity generation will be decided. Power and utilities includes generation, distribution, and transmission. But we are only considering for cost calculation the utilities associated with generation and distribution, because transmission is depending on the generation and distribution. Usually in the form of electricity, water and heating, but depending on the local judiciary area, can include telecommunication and broadband services also. The major goal of electricity utility is first to control the long-term cost of the electric system. The regulatory framework should promote a broad range of resources to include or to increase the ratio of average to peak electric load, helping in right size of electric system to consumer needs. So this will be controlling the long-term cost of the electric system for as per the customer's need. And then second function is to give customers more energy choice. So now previously there is no choice which is available with the customers, but now we have regulatory framework which will be allowing the customers to use emerging technologies and commercial arrangement to manage their energy production and use. So nowadays we have a choice available to the customer, so he can select which electricity then they want to use. Then third is build a flexible grid to integrate more clean energy generation. Because nowadays we want that more and more clear energy sources will be used. So for that, we require that our grid must be flexible so that we can incorporate more and more clean energy generating sources. So the regulatory framework should promote the flexibility needed to allow the electric generation to incorporate an increasing production of clean energy through use of demand resources and energy storage. So these are the basic functions which are used by the utility functions, or they are the functions which are to be performed by the utility functions. Because now more and more energy resources are available and there are many sources, there are many companies which is coming. So because of their incorporation, we have more functions which has to be performed by the modern electric utilities. So that is reliability of the service, reliability of the services, connectivity, so for reliability services, we have pole and line maintenance, circuit reconfigurations, supplementary power sources, underground lines, power factor corrections, distribution system engineering, voltage optimization, etc. So when we are talking about reliability of the service, we have required that maintenance must be good. We have circuits to be reconfigured so that there will be more reliable systems. We have supplementary energy sources. So that when one source is not available, we can utilize the source. Then we will be having power factor corrections. And now more and more underground lines are utilized. So maintenance of the underground and proper distribution systems. When we are talking about connectivity services, we require that we have distribution line, automation, multi-directional power flow, because nowadays it is not one-way communication. We have utilities which are having multi-directional flow. That means the power can be used from the grid, and we have the system in which the power can be sent back to the grid when we have excess energy available with us. So we require that connectivity services to be improved. Then we have network integration. So when we are talking about network integration services, we require that we will be easily schedule the power system. We have storage based power. And as now we have electric vehicles, so we require that electrical vehicles charging service will be provided by the system, and we require that distribution planning must be done. And then we have transaction management, So when we are talking about transaction management services, where we have clearing and settlement, among the various parties, integration of distributed energy sources, and we have meters. So smart meters. And then last is your customer engagement services. So in which we have own home energy optimization system, we have appliance automation, intelligent load management, energy efficient program, delivering customer support, low income engagement, and electric vehicle education. They all will be the function which will be performed by the utilities, because previously the electrical utilities function is only to generate the electricity and distribute that electricity. But nowadays, as we are progressing in 21st century, we require that we don't require a passive utilities. We require that the utilities must be customer friendly and economical and optimized. So we require that the function which are performed by the utilities must be very high as compared to the previous system. So now when we are talking about restructuring of power system, so first we require what is your traditional system which we are following. So first we will be discussing about traditional power industry. So in traditional power state, we have generation, then we have transmission, then we have distribution, and then we have customers. So in traditional power industries, we have communication only between generation, transmission, and distribution. There is no communication which is taking place with the customers. So the electric power industry has been operated as a vertically integrated, regulated monopoly. Each word has a significant meaning, which is vertically integrated, regulated, monopoly. Vertically means we have only vertical flow of information. We are getting information only within the generation, transmission and distribution. There is no information flow from the customer side. So we have vertical, we have integrated means all the systems are integrated. Regulated means these are the regulated by the agencies, and monopoly means the customer has no decision making on the cost service of the company, and only the companies will be have the monopoly on deciding the cost generation. So the cost of electricity to the customer is have monopoly of the local electric utilities, and they are not affected or controlled by the customer. So in previously we have regulated monopoly where no control has been available to the customer, and the customer has to purchase on the cost which is given by the electric utility. So the vertical integrated regulating monopoly will be owned by owning the generation, transmission and distribution facilities of the power system. It has also been a local monopoly in the sense that in any area, one company or government agency will be selling the electric power and services to all the customers. So monopoly because we have only one company, generally government, which will be selling the electric power to the customer. So it will be selling the electric power and services to the customers. The regulations are generally imposed by the government or the government authorities. So the regulations will be decided by government. And these essentially represented a set of rule or framework that the government has imposed so as to run the system smoothly and with discipline, without undue advantage to any particular entity at the cost of end consumer. All practical power system of earlier days used to regulated by the government. So when we are talking about vertical integrated regulated monopoly or traditional power industry, the main characteristics are first, monopoly of franchises. So only the national or local electricity utility was permitted to produce, transmit, distribute, and sell commercial electric power within its service territory. So we have only one service agency which is available to an area. Second is obligation to serve. The utility has to provide electricity for the needs of all the consumers in its service area, not just those that were profitable. So when an agency has been decided, it has obligation to serve and it has to provide electricity to all the consumers in that area, and not to the profitable customers only. Then we have third, regulatory oversight. This utility businesses and operating practices had to conform to guidelines and rules which are set by the government regulatories, and there are no control of businesses and operating agencies on the rules and regulation of the system. Then we have regulated rates. The electric utilities, the rates were either set or regulated by the government regulatory rules and guidelines, and the agencies have no power to decide at what cost they will be supplying the power to the customers. Then we have guaranteed rate of return. The government guaranteed that regulated rules would provide the electric utility with a reasonable or fair profit margin above its cost. So there will be always a guaranteed rate of return which is associated with the companies. So they will be getting a reasonable or fair profit margin above its cost. And then we have least cost operation. So the electric utility was required to operate in a manner that the minimum overall cost is required for the generation of electricity. So these are the basic characteristics which are associated with traditional power industries, or we can say vertically integrated monopolies. So when we are talking about vertical integrated monopolies, they could not provide services as efficiently as competitive firms. So they are not able to provide services as efficiently as competitive firms. Because when there is no competition, once the rate has been decided, the companies have all the authorities on which terms and conditions they will be supplying the power, and they could not provide a efficient service to the firms as that of competitive firms. The competitive firms are used in airlines, telephone, and gas industries. The electric power industries plan to improve its efficiency by providing a more reliable energy at least cost to consumer through restructuring. So for providing the reasonable cost to the consumers, we require that the power system must be regulated or restructured so that the cost of generation to the consumer can be reduced. A competition is guaranteed by establishing a restructured environment in which customer could choose to buy from different suppliers and change supplier as they wish in order to pay market-based rates. So previously they have monopolies in the system. So after restructuring, now the customer have choice to buy from different suppliers. And they can change the suppliers as they wish in order to pay market based rates. So the cost, because due to competitive environment, so due to these factors, nowadays we have many more power system which is not vertically integrated, and we have the power system which have controlled by the customers also, and the customer have choice to select on the basis of their requirement. So previously it will be done by the agency only, and there is no communication which will be taking place between the consumer and the regulating agencies. Now in restructured power system, we have companies which are giving power on their own terms. So now, what are the benefits of deregulation? So the benefits which are associated with the deregulation is, because of the competitive environment, offer a good range of benefit to the customers as well as to the private entities. It is claimed that some of the sufficient benefit of the power industries are: first, electricity price will go down. So it is common understanding that the company's price, competitive prices are lesser than the monopoly prices. It significantly reduces the cost of power charges to the small businesses and customers. The cost of electricity generation will be reduced by driving prices through market forces and more competitions. Then second is choice to the customer. The customer have, nowadays the customer have so nowadays the customer have the choice for its retailers. The retailers will compete not only on the price offered, but also on the other facilities provided to the customer. These could include better plans, better reliability, better quality of supply. This will provide greater incentive for short and long-term efficiencies that is provided by economical regulations. So the customer have choice to select on price, plans, reliability, quality, so the customer has choice to select which company power supply they want to utilize. Then we have customer centric services. So the retailer would provide better service than what the monopolies would be providing. So then we have innovations. So the regulatory agencies previously, due to regulatory process and lack of competitive environment, They will be giving electric power to the customer without any incentive, and they don't have any incentive to improve or take risk on new ideas that might increase the customer value. So previously, only the power is supplied on the standard terms and there is no innovation which will be involved in this. And because now we have competitive environment, so the companies will be trying to improve on the services and they will be ready to take the risk for new ideas for increasing the customer values. So under deregulated environment, the electricity utility will always try to innovate something for the betterment of service and in turn to save the cost and maximize the profit associated with the company. Then restructuring in electrical industry will create new business opportunities where new firms selling new products and services will appear. Consumers will have alternatives in buying electric services and new technologies such as smart metering, telecommunication devices, and there will be continuous development in these areas. So when we are talking about advantage, we have some disadvantage also which are associated with deregulation. First disadvantage is improper implementation or hasty implementation of restructuring may lead to very high wholesale market price, leading to electricity crisis, which threaten to weak its economy and cause collateral damage throughout the system. So if there is no proper implementation methods adopted and improper implementation or hasty implementation of restructuring will be done, it will be leading towards a very high wholesale market price for the consumers. Then employee uncertainty, because restructuring often cause employment to panic and wonder how the changes will affect their job security. When the news gets out that the company is restructuring, some employee may be looked for new employment. And then the stress of restructuring sometimes take away from the staff focus on their actual work. So due to stress on regulating to give better services, the staff focus will be take away the advantage which are associated with the deregulated framework. So this is the basic philosophy or traditional system of power supply, and now we have new methods of power supplies which are coming, and we have various methods of power supplies pricing. So we will be discussing that in the next class, how we will be restructuring the power system and how we will be improving the cost which is associated with the system. So previously we have only 3 companies which are associated with us, that is generating, distribution and transmission. But now in the restructured power system, instead of having these 3 agencies, we have many terms which are associated agencies or utilities which are coming, so that the cost can be reduced or competitive environment can be provided. So this is the basic of traditional system and how we will be, why we will be going for deregulation of the power system. If